say welcome back to Worshipful Brother Nathan St. Pierre, now
Thank you, Right
Masonic
Worshipful.
book author. Welcome back.
Thank you, Right Worshipful Michael. Happy to be here again.
Yes. And I'm excited to have you here to talk about your second book. I say it's your second book because you co-wrote the first one, but I'm giving you more than just co-authoring credits for that
Well,
first one.
you're conjuring something that exists in Plato's world of forms. The book has been submitted to the publisher. The metadata exists at the Library of Congress, but the book can actually be gotten yet. So we need to. So it actually is a bit premature to say that. I understand that Worshipful Sean did publish that in the back of this book, saying that I was also the co-author with him of Sing the Art Divine, the Masonic Songster, and that is true. But I think what they would say is that is in press.
Ooh.
I think that,
Well, let's update it.
or under contract or what have you. I'm not sure what the but yeah, that is a project that we hope to finish up soon. And Plumstone has a few other really great projects in the next 3 to 5 years.
This makes this appearance even more special as we get ready to talk about his first book.
Well,
with
this
the
is
visual.
special, Right Worshipful, because you're the first Mason
Yes.
to talk to me about my book.
Harmony in the Hive, the vibrant vision for Freemasonry's future. Before we jump into this, I always like to get the story behind the story from our Masonic book authors. And in your introduction, you open up with a reference to Most Worshipful Brother Dwight L. Smith, who is the past Grand Master of the Grand Lodge of Indiana. And you referenced, I mean, I'm sure it's right there on the tip of everybody's tongue, his from the 1960s, I think. It was the Whither Are We Traveling article that he wrote. Can you tell us a little bit about that work and how it inspired you to write your book?
Absolutely. So I was raised in 2009, which was right around the time of, let's say, the lost symbol craze, right? So everything is like, and especially in Washington D.C., like there's kind of a buzz around Freemasonry. Um, at the time, I was a little disappointed with the experience that I was having, and a brother handed me a PDF of a publication from 2004 by an anonymous group of Freemasons called the Knights of the North. And this publication was called Laudable Pursuit, a response to Dwight Smith's Whither Are We Traveling? And in this document from 2004, these anonymous guys list out all the problems with Freemasonry and how to fix it. And so I was like, wow, like this is great. And so the PDF that they made, it went point by point in Most Worshipful Brother Smith's thing, and then they responded to it. Well, in 2018 they put out Laudable Pursuit 2 because absolutely everybody had ignored this and we were in worse shape off than before. So that was how Whither Are We Traveling got on my radar. Now, as to how the book came about, that I think you first have to acknowledge the creative spark, right? The muses, if you will. Inspiration, it feels like putting up an antenna and then you're just receiving. And that's kind of how this happened. I wrote this book over the course of 5 weeks. And
wow.
It was I was just taking dictation. And that's so the muses were absolutely with me. Second, I began noticing a pattern, especially after moving to Florida, because I was having new conversations with new Masons, but they were the same discussions that I had been having 10 years ago with other brothers. And so this realization led me to 2 conclusions. First, that it was important for me to document my ideas. If even no one else was going to listen, like at least I had something that I could reflect on. But then secondly, I realized that what my lodge needs from me is not somebody who is constantly trying to reinvent the wheel. What my lodge needs from me is a Mason who shows up, sits in the chair that he's asked to occupy, learns the work, and keeps the lodge moving forward. So in essence, I now know my role in the Hive. All right, but there are lots of Mustangs that sit dusty in garages, and the soul of those cars is to go fast. And so I kind of thought of the book as my way to be a family vehicle, reliable for the launch, but also to to have a sort of more energetic and fun way of connecting with Freemasonry, more sort of globally, right? And then the final reason I would say that inspired me to write this book is that it's in many ways a brotherly love letter to worshipful Sean Iyer, because Sean was an absolute trailblazer in scholarly research, specifically in esoteric and mystical origins of Freemasonry, and temple architecture, and all of these sorts of things. And he was doing it at a time when everybody was just bogged down with Margaret Jacobs's Enlightenment mumbo jumbo.
Mm-hmm.
And so in a lot of ways, the book was my way of saying, see, worshipful people do read your stuff, even if it's just me and maybe like seven guys in Vermont. Shout out to Fibonacci 112. So, so that's the behind the book is why.
What I like about this book is this is not the first book to kind of tackle some of the hard hitting issues in Freemasonry, which every volunteer organization or just any organization faces. What makes Freemasonry unique, and I've been thinking about this today, is how do you describe a past master to someone who doesn't know anything about Freemasonry? And I think of the Gabby Johnson character from Blazing Saddles, the it's kind of how they sound, the harumph, harumph, harumph. And you have this energy as a past master where you can get a little critical, sometimes overly critical, because this isn't how we did it in my year, blah, 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 blah. Or you have this like positive energy as a past master. You're like, okay, I've been through this, I'm experienced, I've got a little wisdom here. How do I share this leadership advice to the next guy and the guy after, and keep this ball going? And I had asked you the question, like, who was the audience for this book? Who did you set out writing this for?
So you're going to skip to the last question. All right. Sorry. So because the honest answer is I wrote this book for myself. I told my wife that it's breadcrumbs for me to me. It's breadcrumbs to myself. Consider the mystic tie. Okay, it's a symbol that we don't often discuss, but it's an ancestral connection binding each Mason, because the experiences that you have connect you to all good brothers and fellows who have gone this way before you, right? So when me read something from 1728, and a brother at that time is going, these Freemasons around here, they just don't get how great this is. And then I read something in 1828 that also says these Freemasons don't get it. And then I read something in 1928 that says these Freemasons, they just don't get it. I go, well, I need something before 2028 that says, hey, this thing is really great. And so it's for a future brother, someone who's like me, who encounters it. Then he'll know that he's not alone. And he'll know that there are others who see the beauty and the mysticism in what we are stewarding. And so this book is for all true Freemasons who understand that Freemasonry is a mystical, transformative journey, and not just something to maintain, but something to nurture and grow. And it is for those who realize that fraternity means fellowship in exalted experience. And we have to be honest that there are only so many times you can feel exalted at a gun raffle or a fish fry. And this book is also for all the millennial Freemasons who kind of came in with the lost symbol craze, wanted meaningful change, got stonewalled, right? Because I was initiated in 2009. So Andrew Hammer's Observing the Craft came out in 2010. At the time, the Masonic Restoration Foundation was thriving. Like, things were very much in a good spot. But then traditional observance lodges got a bad reputation for reasons that are not the scope of this podcast. The Masonic Restoration Foundation underwent some structural changes that just it's still doing what it's supposed to do, but it changed a little bit. And then COVID, of course, disrupted it. And so this book is because, to me, the writing on the wall is clear. We are in rough shape. And so it's kind of like, for those who knew me when I was a young whippersnapper who was telling everyone why they were wrong 10 years ago, this book is my white flag. I give up. I submit to the bureaucracy, but I'm pleading, please make my Freemasonry look like Freemasonry again.
Did a little quick math. It's more like 16 years ago, but I could see how it feels that almost 20 years ago for you. That's how long this is Masonic. And the reason why I jumped ahead to ask,
10 years ago when I was master in the chair and I was telling other masters in the chair why what we were doing was good stuff, and they were kind of missing the point.
Gotcha.
That's well, those 10 years.
The reason I jumped ahead because I got a text message. You pinged me and said, "Hey, my book is out." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, he did talk to me that he had a book that was coming out." Yeah. Now I know Worshipful Brother Nathan St. Pierre, as I call you, the music man, because you're the only Masonic music person I know. Educator, ritualist, historian. And now I see you as like an organizational leadership guy. You're into technology. And I'm sitting here reading this book, and first I was like, oh wow, he got Most Worshipful Jacob Bressman to do a fantastic introduction. We're going to talk about the Beehive and how that serves as a kind of the general central theme for this book. But I'm sitting here going, did he write this for me? Because there's some parts that are a mix of like Masonic education.
Yeah. I wrote it for anyone.
Well, I was trying to figure that out, and I'm like, I love, and I showed you before we got on camera, I love getting a book and really diving into it. And anyone who's ever borrowed a book from me knows it's going to be highlighted. And some points there's going to be notes, written on some of the pages. And I like passing it off to the next person and saying, you're going to get something out of this because I did. And I found it to be kind of a 3-part piece of enrichment. So first there was the history on the Beehive, which I think most brothers or those in the know are familiar with hearing about that. It pops up in a quick mention in the Master Mason degree. Then you get into basically kind of lodge leadership with a vision of like, we've all heard the membership, the decline in Freemasonry issues, but then you pivot quickly and get into, and here are some success stories, some solutions that you can try and grow with. And so what I'd like to do is the purpose of this podcast is to get you not only to come on and talk about the book, but also maybe we could leave some of these breadcrumbs so that folks go to Amazon, click that link and get their own copy. So let's start first with the Beehive. You're writing a book about your vision for Freemasonry's future. As I said, it central point around it is basically lodge culture and leadership and how to take it to the next level. How did you use, out of all of the Masonic symbols out there, how did the Beehive end up on your radar?
So you mentioned, a lot of people mentioned, like, when you say what's your favorite symbol, a lot of people are like square and compasses, letter G, like it's those, and then they'll be like all together, which I call the Great Lights, right? Because that's what that represents. And a lot of people love the 24-inch gauge because so many contemporary Masons don't know how to measure, divide time. Time management is certainly a thing that is a thing, right? And then I think you had. I think I already said the letter G, right? Each of these things, right? William Preston reminds us that their symbols are carefully chosen to impress wise and serious truths upon the mind. And so this directly ties to the art of memory, which I know you've talked about with Brother Jason Short and some others, right? So in essence, right, symbols that you can conjure in your brain, they create mental images that trigger words or phrases or thoughts or other things, and then you engage with those. Now, everybody does this unconsciously, but memory practitioners, they sort of exercise the muscle, and it's kind of like lucid dreaming. So like when you can manipulate what you can imagine in your head, now you can remember things, right? So the tools that I all mentioned, the square, the compasses, the gavel, 24-inch gauge, these are historically part of everyday life. So until recently, most men would have constantly had access to these tools, often like inheriting them from their grandfathers. Because why do you need a new anvil? This one is perfectly fine, or what have you. I remember growing up, we had my grandfather's wheelbarrow that he had welded himself, and it was like, because why do you need it? This was perfectly fine, like and that sort of thing, right? So these are all images that you would constantly be seeing. The letter G is another great one because it's literally everywhere. And I'm going to admit that whenever I see a letter G, I mentally say, behold the letter G. And like that's the point. You're supposed to do that, right? So think about the bee. You cannot live your life without encountering bees. They're ubiquitous. They're like all the other symbols. So the answer to your question is actually in the question. So my personal connection with the Beehive started in 2010 because I got to visit Utah for the first time. And Utah is the Beehive state, right? And I remember at the time thinking, wow, they're not even like trying to hide their Masonic connections. They're just like, it's just out there, right? But then I went back in 2024. I had a second wonderful trip to Utah. And I realized that the LDS church communities, like I think maybe ward level, they embody the ideals of the Beehive: cooperation, industriousness, community, way better than Freemasons do. And I thought, like, we need to claim it back. Like, it's ours. So that was kind of another, that was the catalyst for maybe that symbol. And there's another moment that stands out. When I think I was either an EA or a Fellcraft. I know this because I was not yet raised. For brothers who are in jurisdictions where you cannot attend lodge unless you're a Master Mason, in Washington, D.C., you do work on any degree. So we would work on the second degree and what have you. But a brother had recently moved into a farmhouse in Maryland and found like an old like turn of the century like beekeep or something, and brought it into lodge and was like to show it off. And he was like, does anyone know what this is? And I was like, it's a beehive. And then he was like, but do you know what it represents? And then I went, industry. And then he goes, but why do you know that? And then I was like, doesn't everybody know that? Like in other words, my I think where I'm going with this is, for me, the Beehive is so much more than industriousness, and that's what you learn when you're a Mason that you don't know from like where I point out in the book that a lot of this came from like children's rhymes from like the turn of the 1700s. Is like this is not the sort of industriousness thing is not the esoteric. That's the exoteric, and so that's the answer that I'm telling with that story. Is I wasn't some like snarky person who had like read ahead. Like I was like, that's what that means. Isn't that what that means? Like,
well,
in the way that like a wolf is seen as
for the past 4 years.
Yeah,
Right.
Yeah, like,
For the past 4 years, I've been saying, let peace and harmony. Of one
I lost you. We'll catch up in a second. That's how this usually goes.
Don't. And
okay, I hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So for me, it was
At the end. Prevail.
At the end of every podcast episode, I say it. Don't skip ahead to hear the end of it. At this one, just know, trust me, I will say it. Where does that come from? It comes from a part of our ritual, which I'll paraphrase when I say harmony being the great strength and support of all institutions, yada, 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 yada.
Sure, yeah.
Where does that come from? The concept of the beehive. Bees work together. As you said, it's the hive of industry, the harmony that comes from bees. Yeah. It's interesting because as someone who loves nature, I think of bees and ants as probably the two most productive when you talk about culture. Yes. And if you're ever looking for it to see it in real life in nature, just observe these animals and how these insects are able to pull this off. And it's kind of the first part of the book that you were talking about is like when everybody not only knows their role, but understands what they're supposed to be contributing, thus gaining from being a member, that benefit that comes with the membership value proposition, right? Then we all work together collectively for a common good. Yes. And that's how something as a beehive symbol can be so simple. So for those who are listening who are like, yeah, I'm trying. I want to get my lodge to that next level. I want to be an agent of change. Just think of yourself as that little bee in the hive. Just keep buzzing your little butt around. Just keep doing your job. Just keep doing your work, and just know that eventually things are going to change. I found that to be just so mesmerizing. The other part that you jump into that I really wanted to spend some time into it is I've talked about this with Right Worshipful Robert Johnson, RJ. We've talked about the business of Freemasonry, the business meetings, and how did we allow this to kind of take over our quote unquote stated communications, our lodge nights. This is why I think men are just not interested in coming to lodge anymore, because it is not as interesting as Netflix to sit in here and hear the secretary read minutes, the treasurer talk about bills, committee reports.
Actually, let me pause you right there, right, Worshipful, because like this is what I'm legitimately seeing in 2025. Is they're not staying at home at Netflix. They're going and joining Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and they're
Yes.
going and they're like, in other words, like if I'm not going to find my men want men. Like I mean, it's not. It's. I know that sounds silly, but like,
Yeah, no, you're absolutely.
And so if I'm not going to find them where I thought I was going to find them, right? I'm going to find them where I can find them. And so I know lots of, shall we say, lapsed Freemasons, like who are true believers, like in their heart of hearts, but they cannot bring themselves anymore to go and be be. So to answer the question might seem straightforward. Because I understand where you're going with this. Like, how did the business of Freemasonry take over? It might seem straightforward, but I think the actual answer is many lodges mistakenly think that the business of Freemasonry is synonymous with Masonic education. For example, I've seen instances where the first meeting of the year is typically a lighthearted hazing incident for the new master. To be like, yeah, it looks easy, doesn't it? And the fact that you're laughing at it shows that you've probably witnessed it too. Now, please, because my guys are watching this. That doesn't have. I'm not saying that's my, but we've seen it. I've seen it. No, not my guys, but I've seen it. And so these things happen because when you think that like just being in masonry is what you're supposed to learn how to do, like you're supposed to learn how to just exist in this world and call everyone the right title and walk the right way, and that's what being a Freemason is, instead of being like, no, its covering is literally the clouded canopy. It's starting to go the hell out into the world and do good things because this is what you're called to do. Like, so many falsely imagine that the only thing that you need to learn is how to sort of follow the digest, right? Now, I can't tell you how often I encounter people who still think that reading the minutes and approving the expenses count as speculative practices. Like, in other words, these guys will literally say, well, we do speculative masonry, and operative masonry is building buildings. And it's like, well, I have speculated on nothing. I haven't even speculated on what we should spend the money on. Like you just said, can we approve the budget, right? Like this is all we did. So I actually had I want to illustrate this point with a bless your heart moment, as we say in the South. I had a right worshipful brother ask me if my lodge in DC had an opening and closing ritual, because he heard that I was an esoteric Mason, and he assumed that meant clandestine. So like these, like it was because these words, they used to mean something, but now they mean nothing. Now, so the answer about balancing, I think that's kind of where my harping on isn't even about balancing. It's about just do something, right? We're builders by nature as Freemasons. The temple is and always will be incomplete. And honestly, if it ever is finished, some idiot is going to come along and ruin it. That's the entire point. So start where you are, lay one brick at a time, make your mark, do good work, square work, such work as is needed for the temple.
This, I'm going to jump ahead to another part of the book that I
You can
highlighted
jump
here,
wherever
that
you want, right? Bush, I'm happy
that because I know that brothers like, okay, I've heard all this before. You know, guys that want to come to boring business meetings, brothers want Masonic education. I don't have that in my lodge. I don't have money for speakers. What do I do? And one of the pieces of advice that you gave that I highlighted is analyze attendance patterns and engagement levels in various lodge activities. And I think the key word right there is various lodge activities. That the idea that you floated by so brilliantly here is that Masonic education doesn't have to be that typical instruction or lecture style that we're so used to getting in college or in school. It literally could just be a sit around the table discussion, somebody kind of doing a show and tell. You give a couple other examples. So open up your bag of tricks here.
It's because so what I write about in the book is it's called andragogy, which is different than pedagogy. Okay, so the idea is, and I'm being a nerdy teacher here, or PhD, but pedagogy means like the way children learn. It actually means like to go, a go, right? Like so children learn. So adults don't learn the way children learn, and we're not dealing with children. So the
Mm,
whole idea of like this lecture based, like the teacher has all the knowledge and then imparts the knowledge, and then and and so on and so forth, that works for developing brains. It doesn't it doesn't work for us. So instead we need to see why it matters. We need to engage with each other. We need to be able to say, oh, you know, this is why that beehive is so important in terms of individual bees bringing their stuff. Is I don't know what you know and you don't know what I know. Together we know what we both know, and now we're way stronger. And so the
mm,
idea of learning from each other is the most important thing. This is why dinner after your meeting. Okay, so for the lodges that have really crappy business meetings, and for the lodges, the brothers who are disappointed, just start convincing a bunch of people to go out to dinner afterwards. And don't let anybody talk about anything that isn't Freemasonry. You will have a way better time, because
mm.
that used to be part of the meeting. You used to go to do your business, and then you used to go after and talk about it at dinner with wine and song and mirth and toast and brotherhood. So when you go home, you'd be inspired to want to chip off the rough edges, instead of going home like, what the hell did I just do? And why am I spending time away from my family? This is why all the white hats have white hair, or what have you, right? It's like, and it's because like we used to offer a thing. Like if you read all the stuff from the 20s and 30s, like they were super mystical. Like our people that were like, so Dwight Smith, who's master in the 60s, he's initiated by those people.
Mm.
Things they used to talk about at lodge was the legend of the third degree as the zodiac cycle. I read a book on that once from the 20s. Like these are, and it was, and this person who wrote that in the 20s, it was, here's a paper that I heard when I was initiated in 1897, and we don't talk about cool stuff anymore, so I wanted to publish it here. So
Mm.
do you see what I'm saying? Is like this pattern repeats. So
Yep.
just get together, teach each other what you know, what you don't know. I A program that we are legitimately going to do in our lodge is how to tie a bow tie, because this is a skill that many men want to have. Some men have, and so hey, in your lodge, if you got two guys who know how to do it and you got three guys who want to learn how to do it, it doesn't have to be a program with 60 people. You just got five guys who are doing tie the bow tie, and you just had a really great uh,
Yeah.
education day.
Yeah.
Like that is, there's another, you know, sort of true to life example. And then you're better off when you have your black tie events, because now you've got more brothers who are properly attired, rather than, you know, in a clip-on, so to speak, or what have you. Like
Plus it's a skill. I mean, this was the
it's a
thing.
skill.
You would
Yes.
ask me like, hey, did you get a chance, what was your first, meeting of the year like? And I was like, oh, I didn't get a chance to go. I thought I had COVID, so I ended up staying home that night. What
Mhm.
ended up happening was our newly installed master went around and said, okay, I want everyone to stand up and tell me, whence came you, why did you come to
Right.
Freemasonry?
Yeah.
And I wasn't there, but what I was told was the most common answer is that brothers were looking for public speaking. Why would you join Freemasonry for public speaking? I'm sitting here thinking, let's see, make good men better, public speakers. Nope, that's not part. And public speaking does not fit into any part of anything that is being.
Rhetoric, the tribune. That's part of the second degree. That's the entire point.
Well, we know that, but coming.
I misunderstood you, right? Please,
but yeah, but coming in, but no, that's beautiful that you've laid that out there. But for those coming into Freemasonry, you're like, well, I thought all Masons did was sit around and talk about, conspiracy theories or American history, or, raise money for those in need, charity, really the things that people know us for. And I love the idea. So my point is that if you don't know what your lodge wants, if you don't know what your brothers want, they just want something as simple as public speaking, letting them get up and talk about their experiences, what's interesting to them. That's a program in itself for the evening. And yes, if you're not watching us on YouTube live stream this, you can't see Nathan is shaking his head. That counts as Masonic education.
Yes.
I love that. The other thing that you challenged that I wanted to get to as well is, while we're on the issue of Masonic education, I know William Preston is like one of your dudes. And I'll kind of lift a part of the quote where he said that, Freemasonry is a quote unquote thinking man's game.
Well, he didn't say that. A past master said that to me.
Past master said that to you. Okay. Yeah. I must have misread that part, but it stuck in my mind, and I highlighted it in my book, and I sat there and I thought about it, and I was like, you put out an idea, and I want you to expand upon this, on how I made the comment of, everybody, making good men better is part of what most of us know about Freemasonry when we're getting into it. Talk about the mindset of that prospect, or that man who has an interest in Freemasonry. How is he different than the other dudes in his life?
So my answer is one of my favorite quotes from the book, which is, this is a falsehood. Freemasonry cannot do that. Freemasonry cannot take good men and make them better.
Mm-hmm.
That must be an act of your own free will and accord. It assists, like a fraternity cannot, like, oh, now you're good, you're better, congratulations. If that were the case, then there would be no Freemason psychopaths, sociopaths, like, not that those are bad people, like, that's not what I mean, but like, there would be no, like, and that's absurd. So Freemasonry is a system of tools that then you have to do work. In fact, it's in the symbol. Like, this is not supposed to be easy. Like, it's
right
to be hard. So if you're coming to lodge, which, by the way, there's a great quote from it was a St. John's Day oration from 1751, where the guy goes, "Let us always remember that when you enter a Masonic lodge, you are coming to a place of work." And that's all of it. Even when we're talking about, they're just drawing it on the floor with chalk.
Right.
And they can get themselves mentally into a space where they can work on themselves more than people who actually walk into some of the most beautiful, magnificent Masonic edifices that exist in this world with the best, ornaments and furniture. Sometimes can't get to that mind space. It's because it's not. That's the speculative. Masonry.
Right. Well, you also float the idea, which I love, is that you say, and I forgot about this, that most men who are interested in Freemasonry are just naturally intellectually curious. And by playing down to them, you're robbing them.
I don't mean to interrupt you again, but I get excited because you're first prepared to be Mason in your heart. So what makes a Mason different from just regular Joe, or I forget the turn of phrase that you asked me. What makes him different is he was born a Mason. I believe that. and my quote, like what should be written on my Masonic tombstone, is we'd all be a better place if the Masons believed the words that they said. Because that's it. That's the whole kit there.
Right. You say that Freemasons are intellectually curious men, and that most modern Masons feel like they've answered a call to serve a higher purpose, and that unfortunately, when it comes to Masonic education or lodge programming events, people feel that the answer to that is to just dump a bunch of esoterics on them.
Yes, they do.
They drown them.
And in fact, this is why we've had so little Masonic education for, I would say, about Nah, actually, I'm going to give that to COVID, but because Masonic education just changed during COVID. So I'm going to take back what I was going to say. But certainly right before COVID, it was actually slowing down the amount of programs that were being given because there was a distaste for what was, coming in, right?
Mm.
Exactly what you said. So the Christian master said, give to Caesar what belongs to Caesar and give to God what belongs to God. So Freemasonry is already extraordinary. It's old, it's rich, it's the greatest uninterrupted esoteric tradition that exists. The beauty of Freemasonry is that it doesn't need anything added to it. Uh, about a decade ago, there were some brothers that were really trying to interpret Freemasonry as though it were alchemy. I don't know if you have had any of those programs or talked to any of those guys. That was yeah. If that were true, okay.
Turn this into gold.
Right. No. I'm gonna one up you. So if that were true, then that means that every Mason should convert his home into a laboratory. Like you need to have a laboratory, or you're not an alchemist. You're not a Mason. So like this is such an unnecessary and bizarre overreach. Okay. So what we do have now, because it's 2025 and we have everything digitized, we have primary source Masonic writings, and they are more than enough to inspire intellectual curiosity and profound reflection. Okay, so there's fascinating highlights into the Kabbalah. They mentioned like there's Masonic songs that talk about Sephiroth. I found a paper the title of this paper, not a Masonic paper, pardon me, this is from an academic journal. The title of the paper is Kabbalah, or Masonry as it used to be called. And it's about Scottish stone guilds from the 1600s. And so, like, there's so much stuff that is already there for you to take and dig without needing to add anything. And there's Hermes Trismegistus is part of our traditional history. So you've got Hermeticisms there. Enoch is a huge part of Freemasonry. I've got primary source documents that George Washington had in his Mount Vernon library that talk about Masons from that time thinking about life on other planets. So like when you had said earlier, like, oh, everyone just thinks the Masons talk about the conspiracy theories. I'm like, well, we could again, because like we could actually discuss, hey, here's what they were thinking about in 81. 81. Like here's what they were thinking about. And there's Sean Eyre wrote an excellent paper about the numberless worlds are around us, all framed by the same, and it turns out that there's like an extension to that doesn't make its cut into the final copy, where they start to talk about like people on stars and other peoples and like, so Masonry is amazing, and I don't know why we need to add.
Right, dude. If anybody ever gave that lodge presentation, I would fly across the country to sit in lodge. No, I swear, I would love to hear what the founding fathers or just people in that time, how they discussed the possibility of life on other planets and not being alone with what limited view they had to today. Where if you had somebody that is a space enthusiast or a planetary to come in and give a modern take on that, like, wow, that would be fascinating stuff.
Yes. So again, you were spot on when you were like, this is just going to open the floodgates to let's add, let's add, but no. And in fact, I heard a great, it's not finished when there's nothing left to add. It's finished when there's nothing left to take away. And so when you think about it in terms of like, when Michelangelo, anecdotally, they said when you carved David, he said, just cut away the stone that wasn't David, so it's this idea of, so Masonry is David, and the esoteric crap that people add to it is all this like stone around it. So now we need to like, so please, when I say esoteric crap, know that I'm also saying I want to talk about esoteric crap, but I just want to talk about it in the lens of Freemasonry, because that is what we got together to do. We got together to do Freemasonry. We didn't get together to do like a lesser banishing ritual of the pentagram or whatever the heck other people want to bring into Freemasonry. That's not why we're here.
I agree. All right. The book is called Harmony in the Hive. He lays out a vibrant vision for Freemasonry's future. Worshipful
Yes.
brother Nathan St. Pierre is my guest on the podcast. We've basically covered, I think, the first third, which is kind of your idea, your vision of how we can revive Masonic education, make our meetings meaningful again, kind of bring that energy and that enthusiasm and that intellectual curiosity. I love that you said that, back into the crowd. Let's start focusing on the leadership angle that you go here, because quickly you get to the second part of the book and you're like, oh wait, he's talking to lodge officers. His audience now are people going through the chairs or sitting in that big chair. And one piece of advice that I got where I'm like, oh man, you know what? I kind of can't wait to go back around and try this, is going back to that Beehive idea. Is you're saying, hey, the master of the lodge, quote unquote, the queen or king bee, he can actually start putting some of these officers, these appointed officers, to labor, or other officers who are elected that are only kind of known for either taking minutes and paying the bills, which those are important things.
Yes.
But there's other responsibilities that are outlined in that chair. Talk about that, about giving more roles and opening up more responsibilities to leaders.
Well, the answer is first and foremost, stop changing masters every year. This practice has often been mischaracterized as traditional, and is it's honestly detrimental to lodges, because what this does is it frames the officers as part of a pipeline instead of a circulatory system. And the circulatory system is what keeps you alive. Like, you don't have a pipeline of blood. Okay, so if you have a strong master, don't scare him off. Keep him engaged, support him, and focus the energy of the lodge around his vision. And then, to be frank, you'll silence the past masters who just want to squawk. Because if they have so much to say, let them run for the chair and face the brethren, because they won't win. Right? So the master, I very much believe the master needs to embody the ancient charges that he swears to uphold during his installation. He isn't just a figurehead. He is the guiding force of the lodge. And his success depends on utilizing specialized talents of his office, of his officers, right, in meaningful ways. And that is a lot easier to do when you're not changing that every year and trying to reevaluate who's good at what. Especially when, like let's say one of your pillar officers is in charge of meals. Well, it would be a lot better if we could have a little consistency between years. It's like that falls on one person. Like, that's a lot to fall on one person, and it would be a lot better if, like, it was. I'm speaking in circles, but the master embodying the charges and then taking that and being in charge. That's a thing we've lost by doing this one at a time. And honestly, not every Mason should be master in the chair. I was talking to my mom today, she read my book and really liked it, as moms do. But she was like, no, it's not because I'm your mom. Like, she understood it. And then my mom said the word William Preston, and I was like, thank you, Mom. I love you so much. Right? So I told her, I said, I had a weird thought the other day, which was, with 4.5 years in the chair, I have legitimately more experience than put 3 past masters together. Like, this is so silly, right? To think like what we do is silly. Okay, like, if you have a person who's gonna do it, let him do it and support him, and don't get in his way. Because if you're gonna get in his way, run for the chair. My joke was the gavel. I used to say, from my cold dead hands. Like, that was the because if you think about it, almost like a rap battle, something.
Yeah.
King of the Mountain. Like, okay, like, the master in the chair is the one who directs the labor and does the work and does all the things. So if you think that should be you, I actually want it to be you. Come prove it to me.
Mm. The other part that I like,
you see where I'm going with this? Like,
yeah. Well,
that's an inspiring thing
yeah,
instead of a knockdown thing. Like, yeah, you're not good enough to take. No, young one, I want you to take this from me when you're ready to take it from me.
here are some of your words. You say the Tyler, Marshal, Secretary, and Treasurer can be likened to specialized bee workers, each with crucial roles.
Mm-hmm.
I never thought about this. I have a quick story about this where I felt in my lodge here in DC, we were making the mistake of we assumed the younger guys weren't engaging with their leadership role as Tyler, as Marshall, as junior and senior deacon because they didn't understand what it was. And that wasn't it at all. They know what they were told because they know their part during the opening and the closing of what the roles and responsibilities were.
Right.
The reason why they weren't getting engaged with the leadership line is because we never asked them to get involved. We just assumed they would raise their hand someday and jump up and do it.
Right.
So here you are saying, as the master, you're challenging this idea. You're saying, hey, put the Tyler in charge of membership development and future planning.
Yes.
Have the Marshal oversee fellowship activities and lodge hospitality. Secretary, yeah, he's already doing a great job of these are actually operating secretaries, as we joke, doing these jobs, and in most cases, treasurers and stuff. They could actually give programs on how to better yourself from what they do once or sometimes twice a month, depending on how often your lodge meets.
Right, that's right. But well, so this idea, so the idea is partly from things that I've done, and then partly from solving problems that I know that other lodges currently have. So, for example, the Marshal. So, Lodge of the Nine Muses being a very small lodge, everyone has a job that everyone has a job. The Marshal was director of work, so that way, like even though I was the one who knew all the ritual, I didn't want to have to think about that. Like I delegated that out. So listen to Tom, and Tom's going to tell us what to do. Yes, worshipful. Like so. In other words, when I say the master in the chair needs to be the North Star, I'm not saying like the master in the chair needs to do everything, but it's his vision and his direction, right? So that's the one example. The Tyler, that came from a direct need because I don't know how it is in New York, but when lodges cannot do work except on the third degree, it is very difficult to keep EAs and fellow crafts engaged when the only thing that they have to do is catechisms. Like if that's all they're doing, it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want them to get in the habit of going to the temple, right? And so what I have heard people have success doing is if the Tyler is in charge of membership development, then while the Tyler is outside the door and the EAs or fellow crafts are cleaning up the kitchen or whatever they're doing, he can also be quizzing them on what they're working on or sharing with them, Masonic mentoring or what have you, because then he's fulfilling his role by staying outside the door, but he's also an engaged member of the lodge because he's in charge of helping the ones who are outside. So,
yeah.
So that one came from a direct need to solve in spaces where you cannot have EAs and fellow crafts, just attending your stated.
So we talked about the first third of Harmony in the Hive
Mm-hmm.
is really kind of your call, your vision, how to improve the craft and your lodge specifically. The second section, I would say, is about how to improve the leadership aspect. So if you're in the chairs now, if you're in the big chair in the East now, this is a must-have for you. I want to get to the third part because I think this is who the other part of this book is written for. And I wish this had been here when I was joining a lodge that was struggling and we were trying to revitalize the culture. And I'm talking about that brother who feels that they're an agent of change. And one of the necessary things to be an agent of change is to have a mentor or somebody, a resource that you can get that confidence, that courage, that encouragement from, because it's hard to just be a one-man army sometimes in a sea of negativity, honestly. And that's usually when the agent of change shows up, because I want to improve the lodge. I want to adopt a different culture. As you outline, I want to set SMART goals. I want to figure out how to analyze attendance meeting patterns. I want to be able to do all of these things. But the one thing that this book I think provides is if they don't have that mentor, you have the words of Brother Nathan, who can tell you, I think the most valuable lesson, I highlighted it as well, is how to deal with possible objections. And you make 3 key points about that. And I'd love for you to kind of expand on that when it comes to, you are going to come across some challenges in your path to making this lodge better. Here's how to overcome that.
I I I needed to be I needed to be a past master. I needed to experience what I experienced to then understand why the Lord humbled me the way he did. Because now I understand it's because it's not a pipeline. It's not, and now you're done, and congratulations, now you can go to the Royal Arch and memorize all that and earn all of those uh medals and medallions, and then you can get a cool necklace, and then you can get wear a hat, and like it's that's it's the more I think about it, the more like, no, that isn't what this is. So if instead we believe the words that Masons say, okay, get back to work. And so here I am, and I'm back to work. And so when I come across those brothers that aren't loving my ideas, thank you. I serve at the pleasure.
The
And
one,
we go on, right? Because Freemasonry didn't get messed up in a year. It won't get fixed in a year. So one brick at a time. What is extremely important to me is that we have 4 candidates for Masonry in Melbourne, and every one of them has expressed that the reason that they're knocking at the door is because they want esoteric tradition. And so I keep reminding myself that Providence is part of our ritual, and that I'm here because I'm supposed to be here, and I'm supposed to so I can be the grumpy old past master who's outside the door with a Tyler, like helping them, do the thing, because that's the whole point of this, is to work. And I think I think we don't credit the multi-generational aspects of Freemasonry enough.
right.
So,
To that point, you write,
yeah.
common objections in Masonic lodges often stem from a desire to preserve tradition and maintain the familiar. The problem is they often do not understand exactly what it is they are preserving.
That's right. This happens all the time when oh well, this is. I'll give you a great example. I saw a cool, like, we have a really cool. It's a lecture chart. I wouldn't call it a tracing board. It's a lecture chart for when you're doing the work, and it's easily from the 60s, 50s. Like, it's not very old. And I'm like, oh, look at this. How old do you think this is? They're like, oh, it's probably pretty old. Right? Like, no, it's probably not. Right. So I think that's what I'm driving at when I say, like, a lot of times people don't know what they're preserving in terms of, like, but the older way was actually better. Like, why are we doing the changed thing when the older thing was better? And so what's very useful now is we have the ability to look back and say, we know what the older thing was, so can we do the older thing? And that's, so when I say they don't know what they're objecting to, is they're probably there's something, an emotion that they want to feel during a Masonic experience, that you just need to show them how you're going to feel that thing, but it's not going to be where you thought you would feel it. And that's the answer, right? Because I'm holding the mirror to myself. It's the same way, when I bang my fist about wanting a festive board and wanting the things that I want, and I'm respectfully told no, and it's not out of you know what I'm saying? Like, it's not like, with a middle finger. It's like in a very nice, like, as brothers do. I don't sit there and go like, because it was done the right way. And it's like, okay. And I live to fight another day, because, like, in 6 months, we might have a different feeling on it, and maybe we want to try it then. Like, that's the real lesson of the Beehive is that there's always work to do, and sometimes, you know, bears come and whack the thing and you have to rebuild it, and like, and so there's always something to do. And this actually ties back to our last chat where you referred to as the work of Freemasonry as the words that you memorize. And that ties back to what I was talking about with the art of memory, because like that's the actual point. Memorizing the stuff so it's stuck in there. So when you see a beehive, you think, oh, I need to, I need to, I need to be in, I need to be part of the group. And harmony comes from you don't get harmony when everyone sings the same note. That's unison. That is not concord. That is like, and so it's not. So the whole idea of harmony is that it's supposed to be a little bit discordant. Like I'll give a better example. There's a type of chord, like a major seventh chord, that if Beethoven used it, it would sound absolutely terrible. But when Chuck Evans plays it, it sounds like the sweetest thing in the world, right? Because like a jazz pianist is like that's the world, the water that they swim in. So in other words, like something that is seemingly discordant in one spot is actually concordant in another spot. And so this is really the idea of harmony. Is it's about how do we all fit together, and when there are rough edges, which is what this part of the book is driving at. When there are rough edges, because there will be, that's when you got to spread the cement.
Harmony in the Hive. If you're just tuning in for this episode, it's been available for a few months now on Amazon. The link to purchase it is in the notes for this episode. I'm sure this happens when we talked with brother Chris Ruley, another Masonic author. He was like, well, there's the Ruley cut of the book that was supposed to come out. And I love asking authors this. Now it's published. You've probably read through it. I've read through it. I've highlighted mine, as I noted. What didn't make the cut, or what came to your mind after this thing was already off the printing presses? You're like, oh, I had one more thought on that. That nothing. Wow.
This is my book. I'm proud of it from the first word to the last. Especially my cool poem, my prayer is. I'm really proud of my prayer. Yeah, I believe it.
I actually took your prayer. I used it at a Masonic dinner the other night. It is very good. So then I get to ask this question. Harmony in the Hive is out. It's for sale. Folks can get it. I hope they do. It makes an excellent gift or addition to your own personal collection. What is next for you? Because I know there is more going on up here that needs to come out.
You know, I have a lot of things cooking, but I'm instead gonna just promote the heck out of this one. So there's two reasons for that. One is practical, and the other is having to do with travel. So the first one is we have an EA degree, and I volunteered to confer. So I'm going to be attempting to confer an EA degree in work. I sort of kind of know, and really put my money where my mouth is. So like this is again to for the brothers watching. Like I'm doing the work. Like this is nobody sits on the side, and I'm not the harumph guy. I'm in there, and I'm going to do it. So so that's one reason why I have no writing projects right now. And then the other reason is the response. You said a couple months. This book hasn't even been out a month. Published December 10. So we're January 9 as of recording this. The response has already been so great. I'm booked for Arizona Masonic Con in March, and I'm going to be keynote speaker out there. And all registrants for the conference get copies of Harmony in the Hive. I will be, I'm on podcasts like the Craftsmen online, and this is my favorite Masonic podcast currently.
Nice. Well, honestly, all the rewards. It couldn't have happened to a better brother.
Thank
I
you
can't, I
very
can't wait
much.
to meet you in person and get this one personalized for me, and then it never gets to leave the
Absolutely.
house. Thank you so much again for the time. I'm
Happy
excited to
to.
hear that you have a busy Masonic year ahead of you.
Oh yes, yes, yes. Absolutely.
Worshipful brother Nathan St. Pierre, thank you so much for joining us on the Craftsmen Online podcast.
Thank you, Right Worshipful Michael. It was my absolute pleasure to be here.
Right in an hour. Who's good?
Woo!
No, yeah, like I said, I've highlighted this so much. I always give, I think I told you this. This is the finest compliment I could give. I should have fucking said this when I was recording too, by the way.
It's all good.
I always give Kirk McNulty's book, The Working the Way of the Craftsman,
Yeah.
to newly obligated brothers. And then we use that kind of as our unofficial textbook as they go through their degree work. This book is now going to be the gift that I give senior wardens as they get ready to prepare for the year in the East. Because no, seriously, I mean, the ideas that are in here, and I already see it now with our senior warden at St. John's. He's a really good guy. He wanted to go through all the chairs, and we're starting to talk about his trestle board. And I kind of got moved a little bit because he was like, well, Worshipful, I really like the stuff that you did during your year. And I know Sam has this stuff. Sam Chin is